Since today is the 4th of July, I figured I'd show you guys a very special American-made transistor radio from the early days of transistor radio production. This is the Silvertone model 7228, and it was in fact the very first transistor radio sold under the Silvertone brand. Silvertone was the brand that Sears and Roebuck sold transistor radios under. They did not produce transistor radios or any radios themselves. They contracted it out to other manufacturers, including Warwick and Co. This radio was the only transistor radio to appear in the 1956 Sears Christmas Wish Book. You can see it cost $57.95 without the battery, which cost you an extra $1. That was quite a bit of money at the time. Check these features. No tubes to break or burn out, almost unlimited transistor life, about 500 hours of normal listening on one battery. The sensational all-transistor, all-purpose radio. It's a 6-transistor radio with 2 germanium diodes. Let's see, it mentions the 6x4 speaker, which gives you full clear tone and ample volume. And that much is definitely true. There's a nice folding handle here. The cabinet is covered in a cloth material that I believe is called Tolex, and has a nice metal grill. The fabric is starting to come apart in some places, but it still looks pretty nice overall. This radio really reminds me of a tube-based guitar amplifier. Maybe that was the intention, I don't know. You see it proudly says Transistor on the front here. Transistors were very new in 1956, and you were paying a premium to get a radio with transistors in it. It's an AM-only radio, also known as standard broadcast. And the only 2 controls that this set has are right here. They're concentric. This is the tuning control, and then here's the volume control. Let's hear it play.
R13. Okay, man. Time to be an all-star caregiver. Drive them to physical therapy, doctor's appointments. Be there emotionally and physically. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. Caregiving is tougher than tough. Find care guides at
in a second, and then your phone calls, but
coming out of it as I did when I saw it live, I think he did more damage to the medial side, or like the inside portion of his knee, which is typically like MCL.
You notice that the volume varies substantially from station to station. The automatic volume control on this set could definitely be better. But this concentric dial arrangement helps a little bit because you can quickly switch from adjusting the tuning to adjusting the volume.
Major leagues by unbelievably wide margin. They're hitting 275. Toronto is second in the American League. They're at 266. In the National League, Washington leads at 250. Cincinnati.
Some would probably say that this is not the most stylish set, and perhaps they're right, but it definitely does have style. And it's not just a big box. There's plenty of curves in this thing, as you can see on the side here. I like how the handle fits into the top there. To open it, you just pull back here, and these latches come undone. Especially now that I oiled them. It was pretty hard to open previously, but a little bit of oil fixed that. You can see it has a very nice metal chassis, reminiscent of the tube radios that preceded it. The chassis is held in by these 2 screws, and all 6 of the transistors are socketed. I purchased this transistor radio a long time ago, at least 7 or 8 years ago. I'm not even sure anymore. And at the time it was not working, and I was unfortunately unable to fix it. Since then I've gotten better at transistor radio repair, and after taking a second crack at it I was able to get it going again. Back then though, after attempting to fix it, I eventually declared it a basket case, and I pulled out the transistors I was going to scrap the set, but it was just too nice and rare for me to do that, so I ended up just putting it in a box in my garage. And it remained in that box for most of the last 7 or 8 years, until I dug it out about 2 months ago to decide what to do with it. After a bit of debate, I decided I'd take one more crack at fixing it, and thankfully I was successful. Now, those of you that work on early transistor radios probably know that these early Sylvania transistors are not the most reliable things, and most of the ones that were originally in this radio ended up getting used in other things. So there's maybe 2 or so original transistors here, and the rest are replacements. In particular, it's hard to find good 2N214 output transistors. Those would have sat here. These replacements are at least Sylvania transistors in the right case form, though. They're 2N1059s, although they are made a little bit later, 1963. Here's a 2N35 driver transistor and a pair of 2N94 IF transistors, and then a 2N105A converter transistor. That's not the correct transistor. Down below is an original Silvertone battery. This is the exact battery that would have been purchased at the time this radio was new. To get it out of there, you just undo the knot in this string. It's a Silvertone number 6420 9-volt battery, but it also has taps for 3 volts and 6 volts. This particular radio only uses the 9-volt tap, so that's all I wired up when I installed a 6AA cell holder in here. Other early transistor radios do use 1 or 2 of these other taps, though, so perhaps I should have wired up all the connections. But I have another similar battery made by RCA that I can use for those radios. Here's the chassis number tag. It's chassis 528-48701. And the serial number's here, 91250. There's a little sticker in there that you see in other early Silvertone transistor radios that says, "What we sell, we service too." Underneath the chassis is this little, I believe it's called fish paper sheet. And attached to that is a sticker which they oddly put on upside down, which means you can't really read it right now. It's got a transistor layout diagram on there. This radio was a bit of a challenge to repair, so thankfully I had the schematic. It appears in the Sam's Transistor Radio Service Diagrams book, volume number 2. And with the help of that, I was able to get this thing sorted out. My skills have improved since I first got this radio, so I was able to fix not only the original problems that the radio had, but also the ones that I introduced. I hate to admit it, but I made 2 bad solder joints when I was installing replacement capacitors in this set. It's very hard to solder to the chassis, and a number of the connections are made directly to lugs on the chassis. Now when I encounter that, I generally just clip the lead between the component and the chassis and solder onto that stub, so I don't have to mess with those chassis connections. But repairing those bad solder joints wasn't enough. This radio also had a number of faulty paper capacitors. Now that's not something you generally run into in transistor radio repair, but these early ones often did use paper capacitors, especially the larger sets. You can see one of my replacements here. It's actually a 1960s vintage Sprague component, so it doesn't look terribly out of place, but it definitely is a bit too new for this set. I wanted to use some American-made capacitors, and I had a small bag of vintage Sprague caps, so I used those where possible. At the low voltages used in transistor radios, paper capacitors aren't always a problem, but they are an issue in high impedance circuits, like for example the oscillator circuit. Every single one of the paper capacitors in this set tested out of tolerance, so I ended up replacing all of them. I also of course replaced all the electrolytic capacitors. All of those were bad as well. Now due to the replacement components, including a almost completely new set of transistors, the alignment was so far off that I only received 1 station. I am not an alignment master, but I gave it my best shot, and I was able to improve the performance of this radio substantially. I'm recording this video during the daytime, so I didn't pick up all that many stations, but at night it picks up over a dozen. I'm pretty satisfied with that. That's good for an early transistor radio. Well, I hope you all have a good 4th of July. Thanks for watching.